What if I told you there was a man who tricked the KKK and made them look like fools? What if I told you the same man was a cop and went undercover to bust multiple members of the KKK for crimes and also exposed political figures for being associated with them? Now, what if I told you the same man that accomplished all this was a black man in the early 70s? You probably think I'm describing the plot to a certain Oscar-winning blockbuster movie that came out in 2018. But no, this is a very real story of the one and only, the ultimate troll to hate groups, Ron Stallworth, or some may know him, the Black Klansman. Back in 2018, Spike Lee dropped one of my favorite movies ever, Black Klansman, which is based on Ron Stallworth's life. So when I learned that the movie is based on a true story, I was amazed and shocked by the fact that I had never heard of this man before this. So I decided I was gonna do some research. So I scoured far and wide through the internet, ancient scripts, found hard-hitting interviews. Yeah, in reality, I just kind of rewatched the movie and bought his autobiography that he has. And then I looked at a few articles with him actually having some interviews, but that was really it. And that's because I want most of my information to come from the autobiography he wrote, titled Black Klansman. I don't want my information coming from third place when I can get it directly from the guy it's about. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of Stallworth's undercover journey, let's give some background to the man himself. Ron Stallworth was born in 1953 in Chicago. He grew up his whole life in El Paso, Texas, and in 1972, he became the first African-American to join the Colorado Springs Police Department. He came through a police cadet program that was for newly made high school graduates, and it focused on getting more minorities into law enforcement. He actually joined the program to put himself through college. He originally never wanted to be a police officer. He wanted to be a high school PE teacher. Wait, am I reading that right? Listen, okay, nothing wrong with wanting to be a teacher, we need them. But I've never met a single person that's actually said they wanted to be a PE teacher. But I don't know, Ron Stallworth being a gym teacher just doesn't sound like it would work out. Sorry for that. Anyway, Stallworth started off his career in the records department as a cadet, but a few years later he was promoted to detective in the narcotics division.
There's never been a black cop in this city. We think you might be the man to open things up around here.
After consistently asking detectives details about their jobs and constantly asking the sergeant in charge whenever he saw him, quote, "Make me a narc." His first undercover operation was to check out a black activist rally run by Stokely Carmichael. Carmichael would later be known as Kwame Ture and was a very prominent voice of black activism in the early 1970s. He would of course investigate multiple other organizations in the future, such as the KKK, but unfortunately he was forced to keep it a secret and off the books for years, even after he retired in 2005, but then came out in 2014 releasing his autobiography, Black Klansman. This would go on to be a New York Times bestseller and then get remade in 2018 by Spike Lee because the story was so amazing. So how does Stallworth get involved with KKK? Well, one day while reading the newspaper, he looks at the classified ads for any sort of criminal activity, which was part of his job. He even goes on to quote and say, "It's surprising what some people will put in the paper. Prostitution, obvious money schemes, etc." I don't know, man. If I was a person looking to do illegal activities, I wouldn't advertise in the public newspaper. I guess that's why I'm in college and not running a criminal enterprise. Within the classified ads, he noticed a specific one titled Ku Klux Klan. For information, contact P.O. Box, Security, Colorado 80230. Now, Ron expected it to be nothing more than a prank made by some weirdos. He calls the number, uses his real name, and then gets a call back by someone named Ken Odell. To his surprise, actually wants to know information about him to see if he wants to join the KKK. And Stallworth proceeds to give a master class on acting, should have gotten an Oscar for this alone, on the most racist white man he could portray.
What's your story?
Well, since you asked, I hate niggers. I hate Jews. Spics and mix. Dagos and chinks. But my mouth to God's ears, I really hate those nigger rats. And anyone else, really, that doesn't have pure white Aryan blood running through their veins.
And he knows how to do this because of his life as a black man in the 70s. He's been through it, he's understood it, he's heard all the slurs you can throw at him. Ron Stallworth, a black detective, just convinced a racist white man that he is also a racist white man that wants to take down all minorities in America. You can't make this up. Soon after, Ron is invited to meet Ken in person and the investigation begins. Now, if you haven't realized yet, Ron Stallworth is black, so he couldn't actually go meet the KKK in person, of course. So with the help of some white detectives he enlisted to go undercover, they were able to infiltrate multiple chapters of the KKK within Colorado Springs and the rest of the state. Now, there were multiple officers working in this investigation with Stallworth, but the most notable and talked about one is Chuck. I don't know why in the book he's just named Chuck. There's no last name, no date of birth, where he's from, nothing like that within the book from Stallworth's memoir. However, in the movie, Chuck is given a lot more background and a completely different name, actually, too. His name is Flip Zimmerman, and he's a Jewish undercover detective for the police force.
Undercover or something? You ask too many questions.
For continuity's sake, though, we're going to continue to reference him as Chuck, since that is what he is referenced as in the book by Ron Stallworth. Chuck would be the person going to meetings and events as Ron Stallworth undercover, while the actual Ron Stallworth would continue talking to leaders and other members of the chapter on the phone. Together, they make one whole
Ron Stallworth.
Stallworth didn't just talk to members and chapter leaders, he also got a hold of the Grand Wizard of the KKK at the time, David Duke. He went on to have several conversations with David Duke, where David Duke even calls him a friend in some of these conversations. David Duke rebranded the KKK. He helps form a modern form of racism that is less loud and in your face, but more strategic and manipulative. As Stallworth says in his book, he spawned a new racism for the white-ring masses, one that melded the antipathy to blacks and other minorities to general dissatisfaction with government and a fear of an ever-changing world. He wouldn't say any slurs in public, nor would he wear the regular KKK robes or associate with them. He would just say he thinks that all black people should go back to Africa, or that they should have a few states to themselves. You know, separate but equal, because we all know how well that worked the first time. Stallworth's undercover investigation into the Klan led to stopping a ton of KKK-related problems, from stopping multiple cross-burnings to exposing high-ranking political officials for affiliating with the KKK, such as the mayor of Denver at the time, Benjamin Stapleton. He also exposed members of the Colorado State Senate and high-ranking military members who had access to high-caliber weapons and bombs, which would have most likely been put into the hands of KKK members that were a part of Stallworth's chapter and then used to bomb a local gay bar in the area. So because one man decided to prank call a random ad in the newspaper, we got one of the most insane and hilariously ironic stories to come out of African American history, and that in my opinion isn't talked about enough. Ron Stallworth was a black cop in the 70s that has already had a massive amount of challenges in his own right, hated by the white community because of his skin and hated by the black community because of his uniform. He still found a way to both accomplish his job and help the black community.